Welcome back to the OurView Podcast. On today's episode, I welcome my guest, Mariah Hillis. Mariah shares her story of living with a disability, her journey of becoming a teacher, and why representation in fields like education matter. I would like to welcome everyone back to another episode of the OurView Podcast, where we aim to educate, raise awareness, and change the tone of conversation about disabilities. I'm happy to welcome my guest today, Mariah Hillis, and I am grateful and thankful for you to be on the show today.
Oh, thanks so much. I'm glad to be here.
So you and I, we talked a little bit before we started recording. And we met through the Diversibility group. So Tiffany Yu was a guest on my podcast. I don't even know, the days just run together. So I don't even know. It was a couple months ago. I don't remember exactly which month it was. I believe it was early in 2021 that she was on as a guest. And she connected me with a lot of people who are connected through her Diversibility community. So I'm really happy that you are on with me today, and I'm excited for you to share your story with everybody.
Oh, I'm glad to do it.
Yeah, so to start off, I always ask my guests to introduce themselves. And can you tell us a little bit about who Mariah is?
Okay, well, my name is Mariah Hillis. I'm 27 years old and I live in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. If you don't know where that is, find North Dakota on a map and go straight up for quite a bit. You'll eventually find it. Yeah. Yes, I live with I live with my parents and my two younger brothers and my dog. I was born with a spinal cord injury, a high cervical spinal cord injury that caused a couple of different things. It caused a physical disability and it caused something called central hyperventilation syndrome. So I don't breathe spontaneously. I don't breathe while I'm asleep or tired or well, we once found that we realized that I don't breathe spontaneously if I'm on some painkillers, some high painkillers, or if I'm sick.
Mhm.
And so I have a tracheostomy tube. It's a little plastic thing that kind of goes into my neck and into my airway. And then I have a ventilator at night. So it's a big machine that'll breathe for me. And I hook it up to this tube on my neck. And that keeps me breathing when my brain just doesn't tell me to do it anymore,
Mhm.
which is super inconvenient. And yeah, I I can walk, which is a bit of a misconception. I can walk, not very well. So I have a hard time walking a cane, and I have a wheelchair for if I have to go on a long distance, or if I'm going with like a large group of people who don't realize to slow down to my speed. I have no, I don't go very fast. I don't walk I don't go very quickly. So yeah, so I'll take the wheelchair. Um, yeah, that's kind of the majority of my diagnoses, I guess.
Mhm.
But I am one thing I joke about is I say I'm a bit of a chronic student. I constantly am going to school for something. Constantly. It took me 6 years to get my bachelor's degree. That was kind of disability related, but maybe I just couldn't stop. I liked doing it so much. I was such a big nerd because I got a degree in history and I came out of class once. I'm like, guess what? Super strange historical fact I learned today. And people would be like, oh no, what's going to happen now? Oh no, what are we going to know that we did not need to know? And so, yeah. And then I
Wow.
got my bachelor's degree, and then I took a year off, and then there was a pandemic. And then I ended up going back to school. I'm now in here they call it the College of Education, but I'm just training to be a teacher. I'm in teacher school.
Oh, that's great.
And
That's really great.
yeah, so that's kind of who I am. I go to school and I have a ventilator and I have a dog and I do all sorts of weird nerdy things. So that's kind of who I am.
Great. Yeah. So you mentioned that you were born with a spinal cord injury, a cervical spinal cord injury. Can you share a little bit about that? Do you know how many people this affects around in your country or around the globe, or any information about the cervical spinal cord injury that you can share with anybody?
I honestly don't know how many people this particular injury affects. I have met two other people. I know of a couple of more through them, and one of my doctors actually knew somebody else who had a cervical spinal cord injury, but I don't think it was a birth injury. With that one person, mine was very specifically a birth injury. So when I was born, I I'm not quite sure if I have the story exactly straight, but this is my general understanding. Um, a couple of things happened. One, when most normally when babies are being born, they're facing down, like their face is like down to the ground. But I was facing up and I was stuck. And so they used forceps to try to get me out, and they like gave me a pull and a twist and injured the top of my spine. And where mine, it's kind of injured, it's pretty much where my spine meets my brain, where the top of my spine meets the brainstem. So kind of right in there. That's why it kind of caused a really funky injury, because like it injured my automatic nervous system and it injured my spine. So that's what caused the physical injury. But it was this automatic nervous system that people couldn't quite figure out what happened. But that once they figured out exactly how the spinal cord was injured, like, okay, that actually does make a little bit of sense. But the fact that I can walk, also the reason, because I'm not like, no, I'm not, I can't walk, not very well, but I can. A lot of people that have this injury do use wheelchairs. The majority of the time, or all the time, I'm not quite sure. Not just kind of inconsistently like me. So it affected me in a strange way. So yeah, I really wouldn't have a number for you. So at this point, I could maybe count 4, maybe 5. I'm not sure. So yeah.
But it's again, we had talked a little bit about this before we started recording, that no matter how many people have that diagnosis, it affects everybody differently. And I think you mentioned that in the use of wheelchairs. For you, you can walk, like you said, maybe not very well or for very long, but you're able to walk. And there are some people who may have that same injury who have to use a wheelchair full time. So I think it's very important, for people like yourself and everybody who has any type of disability diagnosis to share their story and to, get the information out there about their specific condition and how it impacts them. So I appreciate you sharing that with me.
Anytime.
Yeah. And you also mentioned that as a result of the cervical spinal cord injury, you have something that's called central hypoventilation syndrome, and you have to use the ventilator. So is that something that occurred at the same time, or did it develop for you later on as you got older in childhood or early adulthood?
No, it occurred right away. That was the thing that was actually noticed first when I was born, was that I wasn't breathing. That was one thing that's a little bit odd, was so I was crash intubated, like I had the tube down my throat for the first 5 weeks, I think, of my life, about that, around there, and then they put in the tracheostomy. And so I've always had a ventilator. I have my own little setup at home. I have to have a funky looking bedside table so the ventilator can go in underneath, and I have like all my stuff on top, like my phone and my books. And so I have this like funny little like 3-story 2 or 3 kind of level bedside table. I'd have to have all of these medical supplies on the second part of the middle level, like in the drawer on that middle shelf. I've been through a couple bedside tables that they take a bit of a beating. So No, but I've always been ventilated. I've always had this central hyperventilation. The interesting thing about me, though, is that when I was younger, like when I was a baby, um, I was ventilated almost 24/7. But as I got older and I recovered from the injury, the various different muscles kicked in, I guess, and started to heal. So I was able to breathe spontaneously while I was awake. So I didn't need to be attached to the machine all day, every day. It was just while I was either asleep or ill or tired, um, which did change things. Because if you do have to drag a ventilator everywhere, like everywhere you go, I mean everywhere you go, like to the kitchen, to the bathroom, outside, to the grocery store, it is complicated and difficult. Like,
Mhm.
like you like people like a parent will have to take their little kid, take the little kid and have the diaper bag and the stroller and the whole thing, then attach a ventilator to that.
Right.
And it's a big machine. It's gotten better now, but I was born in the mid 90s. And so at that point, they weren't this compact. They were these big kind of clunkers. Um, which, yeah. And so you have to have 50-pound machine and all the tubing and sometimes oxygen tanks as well. And it's just complicated and difficult. And so it's once I was able to kind of breathe more spontaneously while I was awake, you didn't have to take the machine absolutely everywhere I went. Yeah, I
Right.
still had to take it a lot of places, but not absolutely everywhere. So
Yeah, and that's
yeah,
I'm glad you shared that. You know, that your time having to use the overtime, that using the ventilator, your time being on it has decreased to when you're tired or, you know, not feeling well or sleeping, versus how it was when you were younger and you had to be connected to it 24/7. And as you said, it can get very you know, I guess very cumbersome to try to you know, carry all of that everywhere. So, you know, I'm glad that you shared that with us to, you know, I guess that, and yeah, as you mentioned, that your injury had gotten better and, you know, your muscles were able to kick in and strengthen a lot over time, and you know, you were able to lessen your time on the use of the ventilator.
yeah, that was like I'm not quite sure the exact time frame. I do know that one lung kicked in, I think when I was 3 months old, and then the other one when I was six, I think. I
Hmm.
think that's the time frame. So when I was discharged from the hospital, like totally, I actually spent the first almost year of my life in inpatient as an inpatient at the hospital. I went home. I think I did like a weekend trip over Thanksgiving, the year I'd gone home, like Canadian Thanksgiving. So that's early October. The reason why I bring that up is because that is important for the time frame. Um, and so I went home early October for a couple of days, and then they brought me back, um, just as like a trial run. And then when I was fully discharged, like 5 weeks later, it was a week before my first birthday. There's a picture, it's a Polaroid photo, and the day I was discharged, and they wrote the date on it. And the date is November 9th, 1995. I was born November 16th, 1994. That is a week to the day.
Wow.
So yeah, and it's kind of the photo's kind of funny because my mom is carrying me and my dad is carrying all the stuff.
Hmm.
Because there's like a suction machine and an oxygen tank. I'm still hooked up to oxygen at this point. And so he was carrying the oxygen tank and the suction machine and just all the baby stuff. um, and so it was. So the picture is kind of funny if you like take a look at it. It's like, oh, okay, I see what's happened. So yeah,
Well,
like
I'm excited that you're a fellow November birthday. I was born November 25th, so
oh,
that's yes, very exciting. A few, quite a few years before you, but
just a few.
Just a few, yeah, not many, just a few. But yes, I'm excited to hear that you're a November birthday. That's cool. Um, so the one thing, or I should say, one of the few things when you first sent me an email uh, that I was very interested and very happy to see is that you were in school to become a teacher. And I really
Yes.
think that is so important, that students will be able to see someone like yourself with a disability in their school teaching. Um, I know for myself, I didn't have any teachers that had physical disabilities growing up, and I know a lot of other people can say the same. Uh, One of my guests early on in the podcast was Judy Human. She's a civil rights, disability rights activist.
You interviewed Judy?
I
I'm so
did.
jealous.
I
I
did.
am so
And
jealous.
yeah. And she, I believe she's the first wheelchair user to become a teacher in New York City. Um,
Oh, cool.
yeah. So, I outside of her, I don't remember hearing of any, popular stories. I'm not saying they're not there in the schools, but um, I was excited to hear that you were studying in school to become a teacher. And I would like for you to just share with the listeners, have there been any experiences in your school experience of studying to become a teacher where you found it difficult to navigate? Did you come up against any discrimination in your school, in your education world, in your process of becoming a teacher?
Well, I've only been in the College of Education for this is only my second semester,
Mhm.
actually. And so I haven't had a whole lot of problems yet because I've been pretty contained just within classes. Um, and my professors have been pretty great. I liked all of them. If I had a problem, it was because of other issues, not about my disability, which at this point is good. And my one of my professors, I like a lot. He um, just kind of has done the whole kind of range of kind of working in the school systems. He was busy taught like K to every grade from like K to 8, and she did like worked in the school board and did special education for a while. And I think she actually did something in the board for special education. I'm not quite sure what. Um, but if like a big part of my reason for going into teaching was kind of well, like what you said. Like I didn't see anybody like me anywhere ever.
Mhm.
I didn't even see anybody in a wheel. I didn't see a grown up in a wheelchair, like checking out my groceries, as far as I was aware. Um, and once I kind of made that connection at some point, um, I was like, well, like why? Why is that? And maybe why can't I do that? And so that's kind of become my whole kind of mantra is to I'm going into education and teaching that way I can just at the very least I can make sure that the kids coming up behind me can see somebody like them just doing a regular job as far as they're aware. Um, I was working at a summer camp for people with disabilities, and this was maybe week no, this was week 1. And I actually wasn't there the first couple of days because I had a doctor's appointment and a couple other things I had to deal with. And so I actually got there week day 2 or 3. And I was at the time I was doing some programming. And so I was out at the program station. Um, and my station was empty, but the station kind of just outside where I was like where the horses were, and they had too many people and not enough hands. And so I know a little bit about horses, so I was out there just
Oh,
making
great.
sure everything stayed still for a minute. Um, I was able to hold a couple of horses, so they were able to do stack them up, and I was out there, and there a group of campers were standing around, and this one camper took a look at me and she goes, "Oh my God." And I was like, "What?" She goes, "You're just like me." She was actually older than me. And it didn't occur to her until that moment that there could be other people kind of like her doing jobs just existing in the world. And I was like, at first I was stunned, and then I was annoyed, and then I was like, huh, that might be something to just to do. Like, and I also had this experience. I felt like I'd worked in school, I'd done a couple of things, and when when different staff would be would kind of hit a wall, and they weren't quite sure how to help the student, and I would often be the one standing there like, I know, I have the answer. Um, Even at like 19, it's like, I have the answer, I know. I was like, how do you do it? It's like this. And I just kind of did it.
That
And
is
oh,
that
how
is
did
such a great that is such a great feeling when someone can say like, "Hey, you're just like me." And I've had that experience a few times with the job that I have. Part of our organization runs it's called a Miracle League, a league for a baseball league for children and adults with disabilities. And
yep.
and one of the times we were out on the field, and I walk with braces and crutches, and I also use a wheelchair. So I usually, not usually, I always have my wheelchair with me when we go out on the field because I'm usually a lot of different places at once, and so it's easier for me to get around. And I was in
Yep.
my wheelchair out in the middle of the field one day, and one of the young players came over to me and he says, "Hey, can I talk to you for a minute?" I said, "Sure." And he says, "My mom tells me you run this thing." And I said, "Well, no." I said, I work with a team of people, and we put the league together and we run it every season." He says, "My mom says you run this thing." And he said, "And I think that's pretty cool because I think I could do it one day too." And I said, "Oh
Oh,
my
that's great.
goodness." I was like, "Wow." I said, "You're right. You can do it. You can do it one day. You will do it one day. If that's what you want to do, you will do it." So it's like
Yeah, exactly.
it's those types of situations, and you just said it about your desire to become a teacher because you didn't see anyone who looked like you with a disability when you were coming up in school. So it's just like for those students that you will teach, they can look back on their life when they get older and say, "Oh, I had that one teacher who had a disability, and she was, I don't know if you're going to teach history or not, but it's, just,
Yes.
it's those types of situations where you can say like you found what you feel like you were meant to do in life, and what you're going to do in life will have a purpose and a meaning for other people who you will interact with, and for those students who you will teach in the future. So I think that's just really, I think it's just great.
Yeah. I think one of my English teacher who I was mentioning earlier, I think I've talked to her a couple of times, and I think she's noticed that kind of part of my advocacy is through teaching, is like through these, oh, I want to do a unit plan on books who feature disabilities, or I want to just various different things. Um, and one thing and she's totally encouraged it. I was asking her a couple of questions. She goes, "Go for it. Like, you need a book recommendation? Ask me. Like, just full speed ahead. Like, just try not to hit a wall, but go. Like, this would be great." And I'm like, okay. And she's totally encouraged it. The funny thing is that in my, I'm not sure if it's in my division or from my college, or they're very connected. So some force in there has decided to refer to students with disabilities as students with exceptionalities. That drives me bonkers. And so then, like, last I checked, I can't fly. Like, and it's like,
That's a good
and
one.
so yeah, this is kind of my argument exactly. And so I went up to her one day and I asked her, I was like, "Okay, can you please tell me, where did this come from?" And somebody in the division thought this was a good idea. I'm not quite sure where or what. Anyway, but there was an author in Canada. She's not local to Saskatchewan where I am, but um, her name was Jean Little. She was blind, or just she was blind as far as I was aware. And she used to make the same argument. She died about a year ago, and she was still kind of making this, and she'd be up and talking, and she goes, my disability is not a bad thing, right?
Mhm.
And I was talking to my professor, and she goes, and I said, like, where did this exceptionalities phrase come from? Like, why? Like, disability is not a bad word. Like, I have one. It's right there. You can't miss it. Like, you know, um,
Mhm.
it's a big part of my identity. I really can't help that either. And
I was just going to say that Tiffany is really big on the disability is not a bad word with diversability.
yeah,
That's so cool, so
uh,
true.
yeah. I know. I keep trying to get a hold of one of those T-shirts, and I just can't because I missed. I keep missing the purchasing window, and I'm like, yeah. So I'm waiting for like the next time they sell them, I'm gonna buy one.
Yes.
But yeah, and she goes, and yeah, and so I think she's kind of adjusted her phrasing a little bit
Hmm.
because um I was talking to my professor one day about doing a unit plan and about students with disabilities, and when she first kind of we were on a Zoom call, and I like threw it into the group chat, and she uh, and she goes, "Oh, that's a great idea. Doing one for students with exceptionalities," and she goes, "No disabilities." And so it's like, I changed your thinking. I love it
That's
because she's like
great.
in her 60s, and I was able to adjust her thinking just because I didn't lecture her for 20 minutes. I was asking her a couple of questions, and
Well, and
so
I
I was quite
think
pleased with myself.
yeah, and I think the big thing is for people like ourselves, people who have disabilities, to make sure we let people know disability is not a bad word.
It's
It's
not.
it's fine to say that, that my friend or my coworker or whoever it is, my relative has a disability and here's what the disability is. I think
Yeah.
that's I think that's where the negativity part comes in, where it's just they don't explain what the disability is and how it impacts them. That's why one of my goals here is to change that tone of conversation because
Yeah.
when you just say the word disability because of the prefix dis, yes, it's negative. It sounds negative. But if you go on to explain what it is and how it impacts that person, you can still see that, with your diagnosis, you're still going to school to become a teacher. Like you can still do a whole lot of things. Some things you can't do, like you said, you also can't fly. But
Well,
you
I
know,
mean, that's like, I'm not exceptional. I can't fly. I'm
right.
disabled. It's not a bad
Right.
thing.
So there are some things that we can't do as people with disabilities, but there are some things that everybody can't do. And
Yeah.
we have to acknowledge that. Yes, we can acknowledge that and also let you know of the good and positive things that we can do.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, one thing I really try to like talk about through my different advocacy and like who I talk to and different things is like, and one thing that's happened is people sometimes ask me about, their kid who was recently, diagnosed or, who was born with some sort of issue. Um, like I knew a girl in elementary school whose younger brother was born very premature. I'm not quite sure how much, but just a lot. Um, and her mom was like trying to figure out, what kind of what person I know who what person do I know has it habit would have it to talk to me about their disability. She
Hmm.
goes, well, I was like 12 at the time. Um, and she corners me at the elementary school. I liked her a lot. She was a very nice lady. She was just enthusiastic.
Hmm.
And she corners me and she goes, "Can I ask you a couple questions?" I'm like, sure. And so, I'd known her for years. She like coached my soccer team. Like, yeah, I was like, sure, you can talk to me. What's up? she, um, and she goes like, "What's it like living with a disability or whatever she used at the time?" I don't remember exactly how she phrased it. Um, and it's like, I didn't have an answer for her. I was 12 years old. And like, I don't know. It's my life. I can't stand properly. Like,
Right. It's all I knew,
I can't.
it's all I knew
Yeah,
growing
it's like
up.
it's all I
So
know. It's like I don't know. I can't stand. I
I
can't
don't have
breathe.
anything
But
to compare it to. Yeah, I don't have anything to
exactly. I don't have
compare it
anything to
to.
compare it to.
Right.
Yeah, I don't have anything to compare it to. This is just how I exist. But I'll
Right.
see you at doctor practice and something like that. And she goes, and Lexi kind of just went, okay, I think that actually was a bizarre, that was actually a strangely helpful answer because
Hmm.
she's like, okay, she's disabled, but she doesn't let it affect her life, and she's been on
Right.
my soccer team, and she's friends with my daughter, and she's doing all these things. Like, okay, that was oddly helpful because it's
Right.
like, okay, we can. That's one piece, but you can do all these other things, and so, um,
Yeah.
which like it's nothing. There's nothing wrong with it. Like it's okay. Like it's right there, but like there's more to us than just that we're having a disability. If that those two arguments actually make sense, kind
Hmm.
of smushed in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. So
Yeah.
that's one thing I like to talk about, and so yeah, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, that's kind of where I always kind of go.
Yeah, Mariah, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today and to share your story and your experience of living with a disability, and the great reminder that disability is not a bad word.
It's
I love when Tiffany started that, and I think it's so true. And uh, for you and for people like us, I'll put myself in this, where we don't mind sharing our stories, um, because it can be rough to share your story, and the trauma and the experiences you've had as far as it relates to your disability. So, uh, I'm thankful that you were willing to reach out and share your story on the podcast today. So, thank you so much for that. And I
oh,
look,
thanks for having me.
oh, yes, you're welcome. And I look forward to working with you and speaking with you again sometime soon.
Yeah, that would be so much fun. I look forward to it.
Great. Thank you for listening to this episode of the OurView Podcast. Did you find something in the episode that you really liked? Be sure to leave us a comment on our Facebook page or our YouTube channel. Make sure you're following us to see the world from Our View on Instagram at OurView for Life. That's OurView, the number 4 LIFE. We thank you for listening.